Sorry, my notes messy. Inside opposition search to provide protection for women in order to provide the equality that they so want to provide to these women. They hide them under a shelter on which they'll never be respected. That when you continuously segregate women into their own leagues, when they are never given the opportunity to actually prove themselves onto the big stage, that was what they needed to deal with. Because what they needed to tell us was why when these women are constantly fighting amongst each other, when they're in leagues where 20 people watch consecutively, while the men playing chess are out there getting tens of thousands of viewers, these women would somehow have traction enough to create the major societal change that they want to tell us exists. That was the fundamental flaw to their case. That was exactly why they lost today's debate. I'm going to talk about three issues in today's speech then. Firstly, are there actually, to what extent does male domination persist in these sports? Secondly, as to whether we are still able to support women lacking gender categories. And thirdly, as to how the feminist movement can best empower women. First issue then, as to how as to what they try and tell us, these sports are like to be male dominated and like to see stereotypes. Three responses to this. Firstly, I want you to note that this doesn't change on either side of the house. That on both sides, these sports are going to be male dominated. The delta here was on their side. You continue making it male dominated because of course it's going to be male dominated when you didn't allow women into these leagues. When these leagues saw women as fundamentally tokenistic. When you see esports teams like G2 create women's teams that only look pretty so that they can be seen as feminist teams, there was a side that they needed to defend, the point at which you never actually got much investment. You never had skills development because these leagues were fundamentally tokenistic. That we've seen game developers ignore female leagues after a few years because it's no longer profitable. I want you to note the major flaw on their side of the house is that the mechanism to success that they tell us is that these women are going to win the leagues and therefore they'll get a lot of investors into it. But note that, look at what Jayden told you. He told you this was all contingent on investors that never occurred in these women's leagues, the point at which they were seen as objectively worse. That when they were unable to go against your favorite teams, I'm not going to watch a women's league that's objectively worse. On their side of the house, you were never able to generate enough critical mass to even get this success in the first place. What it meant was you trap these teams into a constant cycle of being tokenistic, therefore getting no money, therefore you disempowered women as a whole across the board. But secondly, I want to flip this argument. Because I would posit on their side of the house, you continue this stereotype of male domination. That is to say, on your side, when you continue to segregate women into their own leagues, where they are starved of opportunities to actually engage with other teams, where they're starved of the ability to have PR, to be able to have interviews that showcase their own identities, because no one is actually watching them in the first place, you're unable to generate any sort of popularity or any sort of traction within these players to create the change that they try to tell you. On the comparative, I want to weigh this out. Because no, the reason they never ever reach the highs that we get to on even on their best case is for a very simple reason. That the ceiling they set for these players was so incredibly low in the first place that they could have never gotten any benefits. Because on our side, the worst case scenario is that these women join the league and sure, maybe they lose for the first few seasons. Maybe sure, they're going to get last place. But what was important was the ability to look like you're improving, was the ability to scrim against the best team in the region and to show everyone that women can actually improve. That even though, sure, there's always going to be a last place team, we can continuously get better and compete with the best of the best without needing to be segregated. Because on your side of the house, you perpetuated the narrative that women need to be protected from these men. That there's no way in hell that they can compete against them because they're just fundamentally weaker. That was the narrative that they decided to propagate on their side. I'll take the POR.
All right, will you acknowledge that in current non-physical sports community, like esports, for example, there are already a high level of misogyny among esports players?
Yes, that's exactly the problem in today's debate, and the one that you continue to perpetuate. Misogyny exists because women's leagues are perceived as objectively weaker, because they're not seen as improving, and because the best teams there are only there because they're mediocre. That even if I win the league, people observe it as being due to external factors like how attractive you are. Women's leagues are never taken seriously in the first place. That was exactly the issue in status quo. But I'm going to move on to the second issue then, as to whether gender categories actually provide pathways for women and whether they actually inspire them. 3 responses to their entire argument. And note, it's going to take down their argument as to how you provide, you get rid of stereotypes, right? First, on their Lee House, because what they tell us is that categorized tournaments break barriers of oppression because we're going to have women get titles. Great, women get titles, but the titles don't matter because no one cares about them. Because women grandmasters are objectively seen as worse than actual grandmasters because you're playing in a women's league against exclusively women. You're never going to be able to get the validation that they try and tell you. Because even if they want to push towards that self-validation is extremely important, you never felt it because you were never acknowledged in the community. That when we seen the chess champion when we've seen the women's chess champion walk into major conferences, people don't even make way for her. They don't even bother to greet her. This is the level of acknowledgement that their side internalizes in women. But secondly, they tell us that these women aren't going to be equal to these men. And that's exactly, and that's fundamentally untrue because these sports weren't about physical differences in the first place. Like we've seen women in Korea reach the highest ranks of League of Legends where they've outcompeted actual esports players at the top of their leagues. They've never once been given the opportunity to compete professionally because they're just women in conservative societies. Because society views them as not having actual value because they're women, that they're unable to even get the opportunity in the first place. It was exactly these gendered tournaments that shackled these women to their identity as being related to their skill. Their side fundamentally locked out these women. There was no empowerment to be seen. But thirdly, I want to flip this thing because I would say that even on our side of the house, we're still able to recognize female greatness, right? Because there's nothing on our side stopping us from saying these are the top 5 greatest with female esports players in the world and putting that on Time magazine. We've already seen this happen with things like racial minorities. We fail to see why this doesn't work for women. I'm going to move on to my third issue then, and it's going to be new material as to how this perpetuates self-fulfilling narratives that ensure women actually succeed in the first place. This was uniquely debate-winning because the feminist movement was uniquely based upon supporting women on the ground. This unlocks a new career pathway for women and ensures that they are allowed to succeed in the future. Therefore, we will take this debate by simply proving incentives. 3 layers under this. Firstly, what does status quo look like? I think it's one where where as a woman, right, as a woman that plays games, there's no one to look up to. That when I'm watching esports, it's all males, it's all men that are dominating. Women are subjugated to their own leagues that never got any validity in the first place. I was unlikely to be able to pick a role model, as they tell us, because women were constantly being desecrated on online forums, etc. But second, who are the actual role models then? Because even if women do well in their own leagues, the problem is the fact that they don't get exposure, the fact that they're never validated. As such, the way that society views women in games is as those Twitch streamers that sell their bodies using the games as a front. It is people then who are likely to view women in games or in sports as general as being able to succeed not because of their skill, but because of external factors, that they look hot or whatever. It was on their side where these were the people, the representatives of women in games in non-physical sports. But secondly, lacking gender categories, the delta in today's debate was the fact that on our side, you genuinely produce role models for these women to follow. You were actually able to mobilize change because now I can look up at my favorite woman, even if she's last in the league, and tell myself I can play in those big leagues one day, I can fight with those big sharks. What that means is I'm more likely to improve myself, I'm more likely to compete. For all of these reasons then, you side with a team that actually brought you autonomy, you side with a team that didn't shelter these women under a coconut shell, you side with the side of proposition. Thank you.
I thank DP2, and now I would like to welcome the O2 to continue our bench.
All right, am I audible? I shall begin.
There was echo, but if you mute the other device, then it should be fine.
Yeah. I shall begin in 3, 2, 1. If you as a female chess player wake up one day and realize that you are now being forced to play on a level playing field with men, it'll be a painful experience because those fields are predominantly male dominated, and we say that it still is because that's what has actually been happening nowadays. We see tournaments like chess tournaments, for example, whereby men play alongside women. The difference then is in the ways that these chess players are actually awarded awards, right? That's where essentially women still play with men, but the best women get awarded a separate category. On their side, they never have essentially an entity that specifically credits women who are role models in their own who are women who are role models essentially. On their side, there are no such prestigious authority that actually puts attention into women at all. Because the moment that and that is why the moment that feminists see other women essentially like taken out of this so-called protected zone where they gain much more satisfaction in this women's category back then they perceive themselves as being alienated, and we think that this causes massive backlash within the movement. Secondly, here's why the reason why gender disparity is much clearer when you have women directly compete on their side. Because women nowadays feel less capable than men. That's why steps have been made to let them feel essentially more comfortable. Direct competition makes it very clear that women in the status quo are less capable than men in side-by-side comparisons. Their side only gets to win if they can actually prove that women are actually as capable as men in the status quo. We tell you that right now is not the right time. And thirdly, because of how a lot of women in the status quo who have competed with men, we say that there are co-gender categories in a lot of sports tournaments, in a lot of these sports tournaments, that where they don't actually win much at all. We say that this actually demotivates women, because when you see that you as a woman, when you see a women player who is essentially the best, who is essentially like in last place in this category with like men and other genders as well, then we say that that's something that you will be deeply hurt. And we don't think that it will actually motivate you as a female chess player, for example, to actually enter these fields. When you see that it's very difficult for you to win at all, we say that because of these structural reasons, whereby women are already in the status quo not as capable, we say that this actually provides greater motivation, right? So then, fourthly, about funding and media, we think that it's likely to be more. So there will be essentially more funding and media attention on our side, because these organizations, when they see certain, like for example, the International Chess Federation providing specific women with like a women's Grandmaster title, right? I'll take you later. We think that it actually increases your reputation as a women chess player, and we think that it better sets you as a role model, because on their side, you as a woman don't get any special distinction. You don't get any special recognition for the achievement that you have made in a male-dominated sports, right? That's the difference then, that's the delta. They don't actually show you how these women are going to be built much more better, because on their side, women who are not capable are not portrayed, who are not as capable as men are not given a chance to even win anything. We think this is demotivating. We think it's less exciting for viewers. And one more thing that I just want to articulate later is that fundings tend to go to players who are essentially famous, who have large amounts of fame. And we think that when you have women role models who are much more clearer on our side, that the funding can more easily go to these players, because they are now much more well recognition. For example, you don't in the status quo, you already see a lot of news articles talking about specific women who are able to achieve the Grandmaster title on the equal level as men. I'll take after the 5th minute, all right? And then fourthly, similarly, women who excel in the women's category, they are likely going to be receiving more attention, right? When little of them have won against men. We say like, for example, Mobile Legends tournaments, for example, the moment that you actually push for women's category being eliminated, we think that most women in the status quo will actually struggle a lot. We think that it will cause massive backlash in that sense. And on their argument on how like there's a coexisting environment that makes these sports much more captivating from their first speaker, we argue that a lot of sports already provide matches with both genders, right? For example, chess. The difference on our side is only that we credit successful women much more. We say that it's much more exciting to have these role models, and we think that this actually more effectively combats gender discrimination. I'll take your point.
What is the point of a woman having a title if everyone is going to spit on it anyways?
Exactly. On your side, your women on your side have no title whatsoever, whereas on our side, at least they still get recognition as being the best women player on the world. Your side strips away all these prestigious titles from the International Chess Federation, for example, and we say that that harms a lot of these women. It's more demotivating, because now you as a woman don't see how exactly you are actually going to be able to thrive in these sports, when historically, even to the present moment, when you see men competing with women, you can inherently see a great disparity. You don't see a lot of women grandmasters who are like on the same level as men. They're like, say, I think around less than 50 of them, right? in the current world. That is something that's very serious. That's the situation that we are facing. So if you are just going to remove women gendered categories, we think that it actually harms them much more, because now you are taking away their protection zone and you're essentially putting them on the same playing field with no greater support or like no greater fame, because they don't get realized as much. We say that in the status quo, a lot of these women categories, they actually are much more distinctive, and it actually gathers quite a lot of attention, because who is going to be watching the world championships whereby there's not a single woman there, right? If most women are not even able to fight effectively in like an open category, for example, we don't think that they are going to get much media attention at all, right? Because you as a viewer likely only care about the best players in the world, and you won't be watching women if they themselves are naturally already less capable in the status quo. On our side, when you actually allow them to enter this essentially gender categories, it actually provides them an opportunity to show themselves. It offers them a more comfortable area to expand their skills, to actually train much more. Because the moment that you take away this zone, there's no way that women will perceive themselves as being capable. We think that it harms the personal feelings and the self-esteem of a lot of women. We say that it's better on our side because you essentially get much more room for these women to train, right? So then when you actually take away, when you actually allow for women to enter gender categories, we think that the second benefit is that essentially a lot of these companies who are like willing to fund these women are going to be able to see it much more clearly, right? Because then you actually have a much more distinctive essentially category where they can actually identify who are the best women in this category. And we say that without this form of like encouragement, when you as a woman are essentially feeling that you are less capable than men, we think that the best way is to make you feel comfortable to actually enter the sport, to actually have much more women chess players, much more esports players playing in these sports, because that's the problem that we are facing right now. This is the main problem. When you don't have women who are entering these fields, then we don't think that there's any way that gender equality can be achieved when they're disincentivized on your side, when they're disencouraged to even join these sports in the first place, where they don't see themselves as having a chance, where they don't receive prestigious recognition by internationally acclaimed organizations. Thank you.
Thank you to the O2, and now I'd like to welcome the P3 to conclude the substantive approach.
Okay. The rhetoric of this opposition team is frankly insulting, but it's also quite confusing. Apparently, these are such capable and empowering women chess players, but suddenly going into a mixed league and playing against men becomes a painful experience. Suddenly, they are unable to win at all. This is a generalizing statement that is honestly quite condescending, but it's also empirically untrue. The top women grandmasters in chess have FIDE ratings that rival some of the top men. Women esports players have historically and continuously shown their prowess in beating top men's teams. So what you're able to prove is that there is some level of historical discrimination. My question is, to what extent does that historical discrimination affect your ability to play in these leagues? Because these sports are not completely subjective, that if you just win the chess match, you win the chess match. If you beat them in a Valorant match, you beat them in a Valorant match. So they mechanize that there's some level of discrimination and stereotyping. Don't explain how that stereotyping affects your ability to play successfully in the league. We do, because we explain that when these leagues are completely separate, there's no ability for you to prove why you are better. There's no ability for you to prove why you are more deserving of those sponsorships, which is why if discrimination exists on both sides, we say that discrimination manifests far more on theirs. That's the difference in the debate. So when the second opposition says now is not the right time, my question is, when is? The first thing I want to deal with is their claim on inspiration and role models. We have three responses. One, this debate is
only about gendered categories within the leagues of the competition. So outside of the competition, Times Magazine can still release an article saying top 25 women's chess players of the decade. So there are still ways for you to find glorification and success of these players outside of the direct competition by highlighting the successes and incremental gains they have made. So it's unclear why the gendered categories is the only way to achieve some level of role modelhood. This is not a contradiction because it's a different sphere of society and they need to respond to this as to why their mechanism is exclusive. 2, even if young women are successfully motivated by this on our side, it's easy on their side. It's easier for other people, particularly men, to criticize and shut down their role model. They'll say, wow, why are you motivated by her? She only chooses to win fake titles in her women's league, and all of the misogynistic rhetoric that they claim they'll use, they will also use it on their side. So this flips their argument. They say people get more motivated. I think people get even more demotivated on their side when the only source of inspiration and success can easily be shut down because these people have only proved their prowess within gendered categories. Third, a large part of the feminist movement, the empowering rhetoric, is about not just being good in abstract, but fighting through discrimination and being better than men. So when the feminist movement platforms famous business CEOs, the narrative tends to be that she is amazing because she was able to work through that discrimination to beat and outcompete those men. So we think this is directly in the interest of the feminist movement as the actor in the motion that they never engage with, to say why dethroning those men is good rather than just proving your success in the abstract. So that's why we win this debate at the very outset on this stuff on role models, but also explaining the unique exclusivity of our case. 2 issues. First, are gender categories enough? And secondly, can women succeed in mixed sports teams? First, are gender categories enough? We gave you 3 structural reasons why these leagues are viewed as inferior. 1, precisely of the historical stereotypes that opposition identifies, you are less likely to have people seeing these leagues as good. And their claim is that it's better to have a title rather than no title. They don't explain what that title leads to you having. Number 2, less participants overall. Independent of whether you think women are good or bad, the fact that 50% of the population is artificially excluded from competing means that people think this league isn't truly reflective, isn't truly representative. That's why people think the Women's World Championship isn't a real world championship, because it's not really having everyone. And this has nothing to do with people being sexist or not sexist. It's by nature less people. You're artificially limiting the pool of people. That's why people see it as worse. Third, there isn't sufficient attention concentrated on these leagues to change stereotypes. So even if the quality of competition is very strong, people never pay enough attention to appreciate how good women can be. So they've yet to respond to any of this. That's why they'll not get investors. And even if they get investment, it'll never be the same volume of funding as mixed leagues get. Companies are still risk averse. So Coca-Cola's shareholders will not be willing to sponsor a female-only esports league if they don't understand that this league can bring them successful returns. So they err on the side of caution. They only invest in the mixed leagues or the men's leagues. Let's know the extent of their analysis. It's entirely outcome dependent on you winning the women's league. Even in their best case, people only know the women's world chess champion. They don't know who is the women world chess quarter-finalist or octo-finalist. So even if you believe their absolute best case that these leagues are good, people still only view the top successes of these leagues, and those top successes are likely to succeed in the men's leagues regardless. So at the end of the day, they actually help very few people. Second issue, can women succeed in mixed sports? I want to point out that their only reason for why women would not succeed is because of historical discrimination and stereotypes. This was their only reason. So if we prove that our strategy can successfully dispel some of those stereotypes, we decisively win because we remove the only barrier to their success. Here's what we told you for why they could in fact succeed. The first is that these sports emphasize more on intellectual abilities and strategy. Intellect and strategy are things that are equally dispersed across all genders. And they don't explain how then this will be worse for those women. So even if people see you as a lesser player at first, you will still use your intellect and strategy to beat them. And there has been historical research showing that, in fact, women are more creative in their strategy when it comes to esports. So it's actually very possible that you beat these men. So even if there's discrimination, again, never mechanize how that discrimination stops you from succeeding in those matches. 2, these are still professional athletes. Even if there's some sexism, they don't explain whether that sexism is large enough to displace the skill. So in comparison, they don't prove why the discrimination mechanizes and manifests to make these people lose. In comparison, we told you that if that discrimination happens outside, it's far harder to disprove those stereotypes because you don't have as much of a voice. So the solution to combat those sexist stereotypes was to be on the same playing field. A greater volume of professional women choosing to play in mixed leagues rather than women's only leagues gives us the ability to dethrone men. And take note, even just a few prominent cases of women beating men in the top leagues is enough to spark attention and discourse and for us to credit their achievements, to get people talking, see how great these women chess players can be. Even if we don't win all the time, one of the times is enough for you to start a chain of discussion that wouldn't exist on their side because no one is paying attention. Before that, are there any points of information? Excellent. Third, even if women are unable to succeed in these leagues immediately, they get more media airtime and exposure. So even if they don't win, the very fact that you're in these leagues gives us incremental benefits. What were the benefits of this that our form of integration uniquely has? The first is that you just get more play time with other players. So if you're on an esports team, you get to fight against other men who are more experienced. That allows you to develop your training abilities and skills. So this is not outcome dependent on you being the world champion immediately, but by being in the same competitor pool gives you things you would otherwise wouldn't. And the other side can't claim that, well, you can still attend both categories, like the open category and the women's category. That's not true, because their analysis wants women to stay within those women's categories, because apparently that's the only way you can succeed. Apparently, playing in the open leagues is painful of an experience. So people on their side can't claim the benefits of both. You have to narrow yourself only towards these women's leagues. So at the end of this debate, what do we prove? We explain that we agree that women do face historical discrimination. They have to prove why the solution is to maintain categories. We've evolved to a point in society where we can safely detach ourselves from these outdated notions. Maybe they had some value historically. They have to prove why we need them today. We explain that we liberate these women far more on our side when we prove they can dethrone men. That's in the interest of the movement and why we decisively win the debate.
I thank the P3. Just a reminder that if you do take a POI, give the team time to unmute and ask the POI. With that said, I would now like to welcome the O3 to conclude the substantive portion of the debate.
All right. First of all, am I audible?
Yes.
All right. So my pronouns is he, him. POI is through audio, please. And I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. When side proposition hears the word segregation, they immediately come to the conclusion that it is a monolith, and that is the point where they lose the debate. Ladies and gentlemen, to win this debate, we at side opposition need to prove one thing. We need to prove that gender categories in these sports are a necessity for women to gain greater equilibrium and greater equity in the sports in the long term without sacrificing women's rights in the short term. Now, some clarifications. The one most vital thing that they ignore throughout this debate is the opportunity for these women who are competing in women-only categories, for example, women Grandmaster or women playing esports like Valorant or Dota, for example. They have the opportunity, they have the choice to enter the open league if they want. So you can argue that, oh, these women are going to be discriminated, are going to be laughed at because they play only in the women's league. No, if they want to, they could in fact enter the open league, and that is precisely our goal. We want the reason that these women categories exist is because that we want to enhance the pool of participation from women. I'll take it later. The pool of we want to enhance the pool of participation from women, and so that they would develop their skills in the sports. They have a safe place to develop the skills in the first place, and in the long run, they would go into the open league. They would outnumber or less ambitiously achieve equilibrium in the sports, and thereby suppressing this historical misogyny, this historical sexism that exists within this non-physical sports communities like chess or esports, for example. Now, who did it? That their first weekend, their second weekend both agree that sports like chess and esports are historically dominated by males. So this is symmetrical on both sides. But on this side, they want to force these women who are playing this women on this space, who are playing in these women categories into these open categories. And sure, if the woman won, then perhaps we could improve the reputation of women in that field. But note that since historical misogyny, since historical sexism exists in this community, exists in the chess community, exists in the esports fandom, then this woman has a high chance of being discriminated against, has a high chance to be cyberbullied against, and it would therefore affect their mental health. It would affect their performance indirectly through that mental health. So this is how the bullying, the barracking, the cyberbullying from this misogynistic non-physical sport community would affect these women. Before that, any POIs on the floor?
The analysis from your two previous speakers tells us that women should never participate in open leagues because they'll get destroyed anyways. Why are you trying to case shift towards women are now going to succeed in the open leagues?
All right, what we meant by women, what we meant by saying that women should stay in the women only categories first is because that we want to develop their skills enough and to enter the open leagues in the future. Why would women not succeed if they enter the open league now? Because as I said earlier, they will face a high chance of misogyny, high chance of discrimination, high chance of sexism from this male-dominated, historically male-dominated, historically sexist, historically misogynistic communities in the chess and esports world, and thereby it would affect their mental health. And this is what destroyed means. It doesn't mean destroyed. It's really by, oh, women are cognitively inferior and they would get destroyed by this higher inferior intellectual men. No, this means that the woman would be cognitively affected by the historical misogyny, by the historical sexism in these communities, and thereby it would affect the performance. This is why this creation of a safe space of a female-only community is a sort of a midterm strategy in order for us to attract the greatest number possible for female players to enter this field, to enter the field of chess and esports, for example, and to achieve an equilibrium with men in these fields, and thereby erase their sexism and misogyny in the long term. Change is incremental, ladies and gentlemen. We couldn't expect that, oh, we abolish the segregation today and tomorrow we will have, oh, equality for everyone. That sort of good story ending doesn't really work in reality. All right. So note that they also say that there are very little investors or people in the media industry in general who would be interested in these fields. However, note that in this motion, we are arguing as a feminist. We are taking the perspective of a feminist. And what a feminist would ideally do in this scenario is that they would encourage women's participation. They would encourage women's viewership in this women's only league. For example, a women's only chess league, to gain wider media attention. They will also force the Ministry of Women and Family, for example, to provide affirmative action for women in this esports and chess community. And this has already been existing in the current world. This is why the fields of women-only chess and women-only sport still exist until now, because they are still profitable, because they still attract sponsorship in general. The challenge is to attract the greatest number of women, but we believe that by creating this safe space in the long run, it would in fact attract women to enter this sport, to enhance women's playship and viewership in the sports, and to thereby make the sports no longer as historically sexist, as historically misogynistic as it is before. We also said that the women role models would also be discriminated by men. But as I said earlier, women could enter the open league, and if this woman could enter the open league and could in fact beat the men, then I see no reason why the women role models would also be discriminated by men under the casus belli that these women are only, oh, you're only competing in the women's only league, therefore you are inferior. No, this woman could and have the choice in entering the open league. Thereby, the main benefit on our side is that we have the power of choice. We protect the right of choice for these women. We as feminists want to empower women to have as many choices as possible to give them and to empower them in as much way as possible. Yeah, sure.
So what you're saying is that these women are not respected when they play with men, but suddenly they'll be respected when they only play within their own leagues. How does that work?
No, we were not saying that they will be respected when they were only playing their own league. We were saying that by the accumulation of talents in this league, in this women or this space, then they could develop greater talents, they could develop greater interest from the women community in the sport, and thereby, in the long run, they would achieve equilibrium with men in the mainstream field of the sport, and thereby, in the long term, with this equilibrium between men and women in this sport, that your side yourself acknowledge as historically sexist, as historically misogynistic, then in the long run, they would gain the recognition, they would gain gender equality in the field of the sports. And with that, I don't think there's any other materials to respond to. Therefore, I end my speech. Vote for side opposition. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the O3. We will now move on to the team's concluding reply speeches, and I welcome the upper reply. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't open my mic. Shall begin in 3, 2, 1. Proposition's case assumes that if you put women into mixed sports, they can succeed. Government whips tells you that they have similar intelligence, but when women chess players play at fight tournaments with men, we have never seen lots of women succeed. Fight is a tournament whereby a lot of women, they play with men simultaneously. We don't see them being separated, but the reward categories is that's different for men and women. If these sports are black and white in determining the winner, having lots of women who are unable to be on par with men shows just how, to this day, proposition just can't make an assertion that women can thrive when status quo shows that they rarely do. Secondly, and this is an exclusive harm on their side, is that women feel inferior. This is something that both sides agree. We both agree that there exists gender discrimination. And if you force them entirely into open leagues and open reward categories, you are having no women grandmaster titles to differentiate women who are role models that will likely be like mass media will likely go for to actually portray them as being better. Because then on your side, you are essentially having women who are washed out of the mass population, whereby you don't see as much as someone who lives in society. You don't see that women are thriving in esports or in chess, for example, when you actually wash them out, right? This is something that already happened in status quo. That's why we have already provided women with these separate categories to actually give them a reward. And what does this mean then? Is that you as a woman, you see suddenly that the feminist movement just starts to get rid of these female leagues, that you as a female chess player or esports player will likely get uncomfortable because you feel inferior in the first place. So that when you actually try to go into these tournaments, we think that it's worse for you because you know that you're unable to win. That's what has already been happening in status quo. Some of them do, but then you also know that you won't get the rewards that you want to get, right? You won't get the differentiation from other women. You don't get to be portrayed by the International Chess Federation as a woman who succeeded among the women, right? And we think that that's a very big harm then, because it actually hinders the feminist movement from being able to portray women as more capable. And thirdly, then, if the goal is to actually equalize both genders at the end of the day, and yet the problem is that women in the status quo are one, not willing and also feeling not so compelled to join esports tournaments or even chess tournaments because they feel inferior. And secondly, because of how, like, essentially you then if that's the case, then we say that if you actually have like these separate gender categories, it actually helps them with like encouraging them to actually enter those sports in the first place. When they see that the barrier of entry based on their experience of playing esports with men, or based on their experience of playing chess with men, always ended up with them losing. That is what that happened with most world champions. You rarely get world champions for women, and that's something that proposition needs to admit it. And we say that this actually hinders you as a woman and disencourages and disincentivizes you to actually join these sports in the first place. And if you don't join these sports in the first place, we say that that actually hinders government's goal of actually attaining better equality for both genders. But you don't have women who are willing to join these sports because they think that they are not capable, and in reality, they are seen to be not so capable. So then when you actually provide them with women role models, even though they might not be on par with men, we say that it's better because at the end of the day, you are still providing them with what? You're still providing them with an incentive to even join these tournaments in the first place. And we also say that it's better for the feminist movement to be able to actually counteract a lot, to actually allow women to feel safe, to actually allow women to feel to be prideful about what they have obtained, about those achievements that they have made, to become role models for other women to follow. And we say that this is an exclusive benefit to our side because their side strips away all rankings by international organizations, and we actually preserve them and we actually label them as the best role models in the world. Thank you.
I thank the up reply. Now to conclude both prop bench and the entire debate. Welcome prop reply.
Give me a second to organize my notes. I'm going to start this speech by just looking at the rhetoric that side opposition uses. Because from the second speaker, we hear, as a female chess player, it is painful to compete against men. That they frame to you, women don't want to prove their competitive worth in professional sports because they're always going to be destroyed. And at the end of the day, it really makes you question, were they actually speaking on behalf of the feminist movement? Because all of their framing so far was extremely elitist. And the question that I'm left to ask at the end of the day is how would these women ever become world champion if on their side of the house, they were always segregated to their own little league? There's three reasons we want today's debate. I'm going to cover content within them. Firstly, on the lack of engagement. Because don't buy the responses that they give you, I think the potatoes were still half-baked. Two particular damning things that they ignored. Firstly, we told you that this league set fundamental roadblocks that prevented women from ever being able to achieve real success. We give you multiple structural reasons that these leagues are never taken seriously. That because you're only competing against women, you're never going to be respected by the same misogynists they frame out to be so bad on their side. We see a lack of engagement to this beyond just telling us women are going to have titles, so it's good. They never told us why these titles were important in the first place, given the current women world champion is still going to be disrespected by the vast majority of the people. But secondly, we told you that when you lack the availability of role models and people to actually look up to within major leagues, you are unable to actually get any sort of mobility on their side. It was especially egregious to go unresponded to from op, because they tell us that women in open tournaments are going to get harassed to the point they shouldn't join in the first place, but the only standing benefit on their side of the house is that you get exposure, therefore you inspire your own women. We think this was a wash at best, given that their own analysis knifed their own argument and the only benefit they had. You simply couldn't buy their case in the first place. They never proved to us how they actually got success. But second, I want to talk about the assertions that they make, because the entire opposition case operates on one main assertion, that women are never going to be able to be successful. To quote DLO, no woman is ever going to be able to get a title, so women should never join these leagues. Three reasons why this was wrong, none of which were actually dealt with by the opposing side. Firstly, we told you that these sports were never actually about physicality in the first place. That physical sports are gender separated because women had actual biological differences in terms of muscle mass, but these were based on intellect, these were based on strategy, and women have been known to actually excel in and beat men in. There was no fundamental reason in the first place to lock these women into leagues other than to segregate them. But secondly, that the degrees of success were marginally different. And it's exactly why their entire analysis about being famous doesn't count. Because I want you to note that an esports match, in the least popular esports match in a major league, pulls 10 times more viewers than the finals of a women's league. This is the degree of success that we see as marginally different. That on that side of the house, you're not able to get things like investors, point at which people never actually respected your league. Your women were never actually able to reach the peaks that they want to posit to you. And third, that the only analysis as to why women are bad on their side of the house is that they're never going to succeed. No, this means their case actually is a circle, right? That women are bad, therefore they'll never succeed because they're bad. No, on their side of the house, women are never going to be able to succeed because they can't even go to these tournaments in the first place. That on their side of the house, they never actually tell us why these women get experience, why they're actually able to get good. And this leads me to my last issue, as a lack of a positive mechanism. Because note that on their side of the house, they flip-flop between what women should actually do. The POI response in 03 is to tell us women can join open tournaments to get titles, but they shouldn't because you're going to be harassed. At the same time, women shouldn't stay in women's leagues because they're not going to get enough respect. The issue then is one of which that Umar damningly calls out in his speech. When are you actually going to go professional in these main leagues? When are these women actually going to be given the experience and the ability to compete at an actual level, lacking opportunities? When is the question we fail to hear answered by the other side? That is exactly the reason we win. Thank you.